Recording in progress.
So I will call the Temple City regular city council meeting for February 15th, 2022 to order. Pursuant to AB 361 signed by the governor, cities are allowed to hold city council meetings via teleconferencing, and members of the public can observe and address the meeting telephonically or electronically. To listen to the meeting telephonically, please call 1-669-900-6833, meeting ID 811-1858-2184, passcode 788-155, or through the city's live webcast on YouTube, Connect with TC. Madam City Clerk, please roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Here.
Councilmember Mann?
Here.
Councilmember Vizcarra?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist?
Here.
Mayor Yu?
Here. For those calling in, your audio will be unmuted during public comment and when public comment is open during an agendized item discussion. Public comment emails received prior to or during the meeting will not be read, but will be included in the record. At this time, we'll move on to invocation. We're very happy tonight to have Pastor Darrell Kelty. I don't see his face. Has he called in?
He's logging in. He's trying to log in now, sir.
Okay, let's give Pastor Kelty a minute to log on. Pastor Kelty is the pastor for the Temple City Community of Christ Church, located at 5851 Temple City Boulevard, and he will help lead the invocation tonight. Let's see. Is Mr. Choi with the chamber here with us yet?
No, sir. I don't see him on the.
Well, while we're waiting for Pastor Kelty and Mr. Choi to come on for the presentation, let's move up the public comment on item not listed on the agenda. The time for public comment starts now. I will ask any members of the public watching at home to call in at a Zoom number. Once you are on, the city clerk will make sure you're able to speak. We'll give folks a minute to call in. Madam City Clerk, are there any public callers offering comment on this item?
Sir, we have one caller on the line. I've asked him to unmute if they wish to speak.
So caller, please unmute your phone if you would like to address the City Council at this time.
Actually, Mayor Yu, this is Peter Choi with the Temple City Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, hi, Mr. Choi. You can hang on just a minute. After we close public comment, we'll come back to you perhaps. That's okay?
Absolutely. Yes, I understand.
Okay, thank you. So
Perfect.
if there are no caller, and then I will close public comment, and because we've given them a reasonable time to call in, close public comment, move on to the next item on the agenda. So at this time, because I still don't see Pastor Kelty with us, so I will move to.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Pastor Kelty just joined us.
Okay, well, Pastor Kelty. I'll give Pastor Kelty a minute here. Okay, Pastor Kelty, how are you? Please unmute your phone. Thank you so much for leading us with the invocation tonight. Pastor Kelty, you please.
There we go.
Hey,
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
I
we can hear you now.
apologize. We were watching Jeopardy and I just totally forgot about it, so it's my fault.
Oh,
I'll
not.
blame the dog though.
Yeah.
You ready for me?
Yes.
Let us pray. Our most dear Heavenly Father and our Creator and our God, it is with the deepest sense of humility that we have gathered here together to share together the future of the Temple City, the city of Temple City. We know, dear Lord, that there are many problems we face, but we know, Lord, too, as we work together in harmony one with another, seeking for the very best for this community and the nation as a whole in the world, that you will be guided us to give us that information and sharing we might use to build this better world that we're looking for. May your spirit be with us, dear Lord, that indeed in all we do this evening might build a better world tomorrow would be our prayer and invocation, even in this holy Creator's name. Amen.
Amen. So thank you, Pastor
Sorry
Clark.
about that again.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much for leading us in prayer. Thank you so much. So at this time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and
and to the
Republic.
which stands
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we will now go to Ceremonial Matters. Tonight we have a presentation from the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Peter Choi, CEO of the Chamber, will provide a quarterly update to the City Council. Mr. Choi?
Yes, Mayor Yu, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you loud and clear.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, obviously, the Jeopardy question for this evening is, what does everyone look forward to? And the answer is a live in-person City Council meeting, which I also do. Look, first, thank you to Mayor Yu for your tremendous leadership as mayor this past year during historic times. That was a great State of the City speech. And on behalf of the Chamber Board of Directors and our membership, thank you again for your service to this city.
Thank you.
And from Primrose Park to the new library, et cetera, it's as though Temple City has been toiling in a pandemic cocoon for the past 2 years. And now we are seeing all sorts of butterflies. It was a really exciting speech. A quick shout out to my good friend Josh at Temple City Barbershop, who have been a part of the chamber since they opened, and where I get my haircut by Josh, and look forward to getting that done sooner than later. And of course, they were honored as our outstanding small business a few years ago, and hearing his remarks, one can understand why. The great thing about a small business membership in the chamber is that it brings them into the civic fold. Congrats to Josh and everyone at Temple City Barbershop, and special thanks to Scott Reimers and community development staff for everything they've done for the small business community. Now this report shall turn to the little chamber that could. So I'll start this report by sharing that every one of our members continues to navigate their path, business and personal, through this Omicron phase. And of course, the impact of inflation is being felt everywhere, including here at the chamber. We'll see how these two threads continue to unravel as we move ahead in the months ahead. There is a multiverse of perspectives and approaches to living life and doing business at this point in time in the city, whether you're a small business owner or a working professional or any of the many categories of members in our chamber. But our chamber message remains the same. Please maintain safe practices personally and professionally. Contact us with questions or issues. And we encourage you to read our bi-weekly e-newsletters, which contain the latest breaking guidelines and protocols. And if you haven't, please get vaccinated. And if you've been vaccinated, please get the booster shot. We're proud that our email list for our respected e-newsletter, sent out twice or thrice a week, depending on content and the ever-changing state and LA County COVID rules and protocols, that our email list has doubled from where we were 2 years ago. Today is special election day in this district, and a while ago I bumped into Mike Fong, who is one of the two candidates against Burton Brink for the Ed Chow Assembly seat. And Mr. Fong told me he reads every one of our e-newsletters. So a special thank you, by the way, to our Executive Administrator, Fawn Mack, for her terrific work there. During these still difficult times, I must thank our Board of Directors who donate their most valuable commodity, their time, to serve on the Chamber Board. We welcome our newest board member this month, Tony Zhang of Metro City Builders, and we thank him for donating his time, and we look forward to his input on the board. We're very fortunate that unlike some of our neighboring chambers, our membership has stayed steady through the pandemic. And indeed, through this last quarter, we are delighted to welcome 4 new chamber members. Pop Rock Academy on Las Tunas, Paul Kuo, has been very active in the community already, again, brought into the civic fold, and we enjoy helping him bring his entertainment to city events. Blossom Market Hall in San Gabriel, Insight Digestive Healthcare on Rosemead Boulevard, and the Hoya Insurance Agency on Las Tunas. Looking to community, we share the disappointment of all with the cancellation of the Lunar New Year Festival, as the Chamber was involved directly with the, dynamic Lucy Liu to support and promote the event. And we look forward to working with her and Parks on future and all other events. On the other hand, we understand and also support the reasons for pushing the 2022 Camellia Festival, and we will continue working closely with Dawn Taryn during the months ahead leading up to the new date. She sent us a very nice note after we dedicated the entire front page of the February issue of Temple City Life to get the word out that the event is not canceled, but merely postponed. We remind all in the community that we do accept submissions of interest to the residents and business community of Temple City. Simply submit your article per our guidelines by the 20th of each month for the next month's paper. To receive the submission guidelines, contact the Chamber at 626-286-3101 or email info@templecitychamber.com. Our featured speaker for this month's Temple City Today Zoom seminar is local high school student Stephen Lee, who's the founder of a student-run nonprofit, Project Talent Launch. Project Talent Launch, which aims to match students with internship opportunities at local businesses. While the RSVP is closed for tomorrow, if you know a student or if you have a business seeking internships, contact the Chamber and we'll connect you directly to Stephen Lee. We look forward to our next Zoom in R, where our speaker will be from Southern California, Edison. We thank this year's community leaders whose sponsorship underwrites our seminars, events, and networking mixers, joining longtime community leaders, Transtech Engineers, and California American Water. We welcome Appen Services. Until the latest Omicron data fills us in, the Chamber office remains closed with staff continuing to work from home except when meeting by appointment at the office. We also drop in periodically for other reasons. Meanwhile, we are communicating with 2 newer businesses, Pop Rock Academy, which has opened already in Las Tunas, and the soon to open Devil and Angel Ice Cream Parlor in the Camellia Square location, formerly occupied by Somi Somi Gourmet Desserts. And we talked to both of them regarding each of their grand opening celebrations. And I must note that the Chamber's first question is always, what are your COVID safety protocols for the event? Because we anticipate that's always the first question we're going to ask if we invite people on their behalf. What are your COVID safety protocols for the event? I'm happy to report that in our experience with the businesses we've engaged in, they have always been open to ideas to make their event both safe and limited, including pushing the event if necessary and engaging in certain protocols. Our last grand opening, for instance, was last year with United Healthcare in Camellia Square, which was held outdoors in the parking lot, and where I was the only one invited to represent the Chamber and the Board of Directors so as to keep the number of attendees as low as possible. The Chamber continues to balance supporting the reopening of our business community while supporting strong health and safety policies. It was just almost exactly 2 years ago at the February 2020 City Council meeting that I delivered this chamber report and referenced the then recently announced new coronavirus thing located in Wuhan, China. And that it was important to note that the virus could be spread by anyone and not just folks with faces like mine. This pre-shadowed the hate crimes directed at faces like mine during this pandemic, and we continue to strongly denounce this sort of reprehensible and frankly un-American hate rhetoric, and will continue to do so as an organization that values respect and empathy. And I must add before I conclude this report that, you know, when things go awry, whether in personal life or business or in any kind of engagement, I think it's important to remember that every one of us are dealing with a lot of things. And it might be a rather personal statement, but even in the business community, it's connected. What's happening in our personal lives, what's happening in our business work lives are interconnected due to the pandemic. And I think it's empathy is a very good word to use when dealing with any, again, problems that might arise. So with that, I want to thank the City Council for your continued support, which allows us to use our resources to support and promote both the business community of the city and the community itself. I look forward to seeing everyone who's listening in person sooner than later. But until then, let's stay safe. And this concludes our Chamber of Commerce report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Choi, for that report. Does the council any questions for Mrs. Choi at this time? If not, seeing none, I thank you, Mr. Choi, again. We'll move on to the next item, which is—
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Choi. We'll move on to our next item, which is the consent calendar. All consent calendar items may be approved in a single motion as recommended, unless removed for further discussion. If members of the City Council or persons in the audience wish to discuss any matters listed on the consent calendar, please address them at this time.
Mayor Yu, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second,
Thank you. I do believe we need to allow a little time for the public to call in. So let's give them a little time before we vote on this. So, Madam City Clerk, any public callers offering comments on this item?
Mayor Yu, there are no email requests to speak, and there are no callers on the line.
Okay. Well, with nothing more from the public and a reasonable time have been given for them to call in, I will close public comment for the consent calendar. We have a motion from Councilmember Chavez and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez,
Yes.
Councilmember Mann,
Yes.
Councilmember Vizcarra,
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist,
Yes.
thank you. Mayor Yu?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So the consent calendar has been approved. Next item is public hearing. There is none. And next item is unfinished business. We have one item tonight, that is the discussion on campaign contribution limits and regulations. Let me start with Mr. Cook to set the stage for this.
Thank you, Mayor Yu and members of the council. Before you tonight, at your direction, at a meeting in January earlier this year that we had, you wished us to bring forward to you a draft ordinance relating to the state law regarding campaign contributions and limits, so that you're rather than just strictly defaulting to state law, you would actually have an ordinance on the books. We provided you with two draft ordinances, one of which provides the essential aspects of an ordinance in order to be compliant with state law, but also have an ordinance that allows you to set your own limits and set your own restrictions. And then another one, which is the optional. So tonight we're looking for the discussion from you of if the ordinance A, we'll call it, is sufficient, or ordinance B, and what elements you would want to include or exclude. With that, I'll turn it over to the part of the city that would actually enforce this, our city clerk, for a quick presentation. Mary Yu.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you, Mr. Cook and Mayor and City Council. As Mr. Cook had already mentioned, this item before you is a continuation of discussion from regarding establishing the city's own campaign contribution limit. And we present again 2 draft ordinance for your consideration. Attachment A to the staff report would meet the requirements of Assembly Bill 571, establishing the city's campaign contribution limit, provides a mechanism for automatic annual increase of the contribution limit, establish staff's responsibilities and procedures when the section is violated. The second version is includes everything in attachment A, which addresses the requirements of Assembly Bill 571, but with optional provisions. So again, staff is requesting City Council to hold a discussion relating to contribution limit amount, the rate of annual adjustment for the contribution limit, and whether to include additional provisions to the ordinance. And with council's input, staff will bring an ordinance for first reading and introduction at the next regular meeting. And with that, the city attorney and I are available should council have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with any council questions. Starting with Councilmember Chavez.
You know, I'm not sure I really have any questions other than I'm not really even sure what some of these things mean. So I don't really want to take the time for you to explain it. I'm sure I can figure it out. I'm assuming that on the highlighted portions are the things that we're supposed to be looking at primarily. Because most of this is just must have been written by an attorney somewhere.
That's correct, Councilmember.
Certainly kind of gives you a headache as you're going through it. But no, I don't really have any specific questions at this point. Maybe after a discussion, maybe I'll have something at that time. Thank you, Mayor Yu.
Thank you. Councilmember Min. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, just one thing to clarify, because I'm not entirely sure if I understand this correctly. So the optional provisions, including or if we leave it out versus if we leave it in, does the state law, if we left out the optional provisions, does that default us to state law? I guess that's my question.
I didn't understand what.
So draft attachment A that does not have the optional provisions, is that essentially what state law is mandating us?
Greg, did you want to answer that or did you want me to answer that?
You go first and I'll follow up.
Okay, so as mentioned previously at the January 18th meeting, if the ordinance does not contain the other provisions, like the ones in attachment B, the city will not default to AB 571's restrictions. So meaning that the only restrictions pertaining to the contribution limit would be enforced if that's all we include in the ordinance. But if we decide, if council should decide to add the other provisions, then all of those would be under the purview of staff and we would enforce those provisions as well. But if council tonight decides to adopt attachment A, which strictly just addresses the contribution limit amount, the annual increase limit, ability for council for staff to enforce the ordinance, and then violations, if somebody should violate, then those would be the only things that we would be under the purview of. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And thank you.
Right,
and within, like, take attachment A, for example, the highlighted portions in there, I guess is is that part of the discussion that staff is seeking from us tonight, is to kind of fill in those blanks, so to speak, or at
Yes.
least get what to fill in?
Yes.
Right, so yes, the very first point of discussion is in attachment A, which is also found in attachment B, is what the dollar limit that you want to set as your initial contribution limit would be. And then in attachment B, do you want to limit aggregation of contributions to really make that dollar limit a hard limit? Or do you want to not worry about aggregation? Someone who owns a business could have their business donate and also make a personal donation, and they wouldn't be aggregated. Are you worried about loans? Are you worried about limiting redesignation of committees? Are those issues that the five of you think need to be in here or not? And that's why, as the city clerk's office drafted this and we reviewed it, we said, well, let's bring those items to you for your discussion and you to give us direction, rather than us saying you have to have them. Because as the clerk said, you don't have to have them.
Okay. And also, no, thank you for that clarification. Regarding the portion of the ordinance that deals with, like, let's say if we set a campaign contribution limit, there's a portion that says the contribution limits can be automatically increased by some designation, right? So do we have any information as to, is that something that's usually done by CPI, or is that something that other cities simply discuss every year and arrive at an amount? Is there some kind of process that other cities have used, or standards of practices, so to speak, to address that?
So the FPPC or Assembly Bill 571, which is under the enforcement of or under the control of FPPC, they do increase the annual amount according to the CPI. So that was included or provided in the last staff report, the question and answer.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Viscar, any questions for staff?
I don't understand enough that I can really ask an intelligent question. I'm wondering why are we doing this? Where are we at this point right now?
Sure. The primary reason is when the Assembly bill was passed, the guidance that we all received was that if you didn't have your own ordinance, you would simply default to the state's contribution limits. That's not really a problem for really anyone. Last fall, the state revised their guidance and said that not only would you default to their contribution limits, but you would default to all of the other regulations in Assembly Bill 571, which includes some things that are pretty onerous for elections in a smaller city like Temple City. The way to get around that is to adopt your own ordinance. As Peggy said, your ordinance doesn't have to have, or it doesn't have to hit every item found in Assembly Bill 571. You have to have your own limitation of some kind, and then you get out from under the state coverage. We get out from under some of those other regulations. That's why we're bringing it to you, so that you can set your own limit, get out from underneath all the state's regulations, and decide whether you want to impose a few more of your own or not.
Have we ever had any issues pertaining to this in any of our elections?
In terms of large contributions, or in
terms or inappropriate contributions or whatever?
I leave it to you, not since I've been here, not since our firm has been here. So realistically, the reason, as I say, the reason to do this is to avoid some of the, not the monetary limit set by the state, but a lot of the other requirements that the state is putting on frankly, on themselves, but extending out to any entity that doesn't have their own ordinance.
And does the reporting become onerous for us?
The reporting does. Some of the financial provisions in terms of having to close all your accounts and reopen brand new ones, redesignate committees.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, I don't have a dog in that fight, so I'm okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I need.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stenquist, any questions? You're on mute.
No questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I have maybe a couple questions, but I think just to add to what we said to be the onerous provisions of the state law, it's just that if you have any monies left in your campaign account, you have to return them. Well, that was one of the things that was asked by Mayor Pro Tem last time. So I have a general question for the city, so Madam Clerk and also the city attorney. My understanding is that if we don't adopt any ordinance at all, then the state ordinance would apply. But if we have any ordinance at all, then the entire then the provision of this state ordinance would not apply to us at all. So I'm a little puzzled as to why we need to spell out all the things specifically mentioned in the state ordinance in attachment B, because I thought, well, if we have attachment A, that simply said that the city has its own contribution limit, therefore the state law would not apply to us. Do we still need the attachment B in order to specifically address these state provisions? That's my question.
No, the simple answer is no, you don't. As long as you adopt attachment A and put in dollar figures, you're done. Bringing attachment B to you was simply to give you options in case you wanted to go that route, but you don't need to go with attachment B. A will get the job done.
So just to make sure I understand it correctly, so let's say one of the provision of the state law that I personally oppose would be the onerous reporting, the closing of the account, and to a council member would seek re-election, then you have to sunset the old one and start the new one. Remember, every year we have to pay a certain dollar in order to keep an existing committee active anyways, but there's no point in doing that if you have to sunset it. So if we adopt attachment A, would I be right to say that the state provision of closing the account and returning the funds or distributing the funds, dispersing the funds, and then restarting a new committee would not apply?
Peggy, you first.
We had placed a call to FPPC, and that was their interpretation, and they confirmed that is correct.
Okay, so.
And then, Mr. Mayor, let me just say.
Yeah, please.
Peggy's right. That is where they are today. I only want you all to remember, last fall, they were in a position where the only thing they were worried about was the dollar figures. So the FPPC can change its mind a few years from now, but at least for our next couple elections, Peggy's absolutely right. And that's why attachment A on its own gets the job done.
So would I be correct to say attachment B is a belt and suspend approach will give us additional assurance that should the state's interpretation changes, I mean, it's not even the state law itself, it's in their interpretation of their own law, changes, that then we're still on safe ground not to have to do all these onerous sunsetting and reporting and disbursement of funds.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have. So at this point, I'd like to open for public comment. I'll ask any member of the public watching at home to call in at a Zoom number. Once you're on, the city clerk will make sure you're able to speak. So we'll give folks a little time to call in. Madam City Clerk, are there any public callers offering comments or any emails?
Mayor there are no email requests to speak, and I do not see any callers on the line.
Okay. Well, thank you. With nothing more from the public in a reasonable time has having been given for them to call in, I will close public comment and bring it back to the City Council for discussion. So at this time, I'll go back to council for any final questions and or comments, starting with Council Member Chavez.
Thank you. So in looking at Exhibit A and B, am I correct to say that the only difference between the two has to do with sections 2.192 through 2.194? Correct? The
Yes.
4 highlighted sections? I mean, that's the only difference, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and these, are these, where were these pulled from? I mean, I'm assuming that either our city attorney or city clerk in adding these has something to say about these, that maybe we should consider including these, or we should not consider including these? I'm assuming that we can pick and choose of the 4 what we want, or if we want all of them, I guess, correct?
Correct. You can pick and choose. Peggy, you did the primary drafting, I believe.
Yes, sir. So we did a review of lots and lots of ordinance that have already been adopted by other cities, and we pulled the ones that we thought would be most relevant or that might be of interest to council for your consideration.
And is that another way of saying that they may be a good fit for the city of Temple City?
Correct.
Okay, so the first one, aggregation of contributions. So my understanding is that means that has something to do with contributions made by family members and or entities belonging to the contributor. And
Yeah.
that those would all be counted together? Is that correct?
So total contribution made by a single source.
I love the way they use these words, aggregation of contribution. I mean, I had to look up what aggregation actually meant, and
I think that's lawyers like those big
yeah,
words.
that's a lawyer speak, I think. And then limitations on loans, that's another thing I think that was brought up last time. And so if we were to adopt that as part of our new ordinance, of course, we would have to also set the amount of the loan. Is that correct? So that would apply if loans to a candidate. Now, does that include loans by the candidate themselves, or is that just from other people?
Those are outside loans.
Okay.
Commercial lending, institutions, or personal loans.
Okay.
It doesn't specifically call out loans from the candidate themselves.
Okay. And then the redesignation, that's the one Vince is talking about then, right? The fact that we can, and my understanding of this code section is that basically we can transfer the monies from one election to the next. Is that correct? We don't have to necessarily close and redistribute and then reopen, which would seem to me to make things a lot easier.
Correct.
So that was the reason I think behind that one.
Sure, and you can do that whether or not you have this section, as
Okay.
long as we adopt something, as the mayor said, as long as we adopt.
Right, no,
something.
I understand that, but it seems to me that by adopting this, if, as you said, they were to change that at some time in the future, that wouldn't have an impact on us.
You would be covered. The
Yeah.
other thing, the way that the city clerk's office wrote it, the way that we helped them write it, it's any office, any elected office within the city of Temple City. So
Right.
if at some point in the future, the city changes to a directly elected mayor, we wouldn't have to go do any updating because we're not limiting it just to city council.
Okay.
So
And then both A and B both include, I believe, the right of the city clerk to enforce any violations. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. Okay. So then I guess the only thing I guess that we have to decide, and I don't know if you want my opinion as far as that is the dollar amounts, I guess. I think that's certainly the contribution limitations. I mean, you know, I mean, it's been a long time since I've had to run a campaign, thankfully, but I don't know what in today's dollars it would necessarily take to win a campaign in Temple City. I noted in other elections there are people running for city councils in smaller cities than we are, and they're raising $100,000, which I find to be unbelievable. So, I mean, is there any guidance here as to what that amount should be? Do we have a set amount right now on the books as to what I can't remember what is it the amount that we can accept from any one donor?
We currently default to state law. Is that not correct, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
That
And so
is
what
correct.
is that amount
The current amount for 2022 is $4,900.
per person or per donor or
Correct.
aggregated donor?
If I may, I also think that we have a campaign limit that's like 50 cents per population or something like that for the total campaign. Am I right, Madam Clerk?
It's the voluntary expenditure limit, 50 cents per, yes.
So like that would limit us to total expenditure
18,000?
for campaign, like $18,000. Yeah.
So does that mean the most we can spend on a campaign is $18,000? Really?
It's voluntary.
That's voluntary.
Voluntary limit.
That's one of those hope you do it, but we know you won't.
And Councilmember Chavez, in addition, if you remember, Measure VP, which was passed by the voters, also applies in terms of the types of contributions that come into play, which the city clerk and our office has to enforce, which excludes certain contributions from developers under a certain amount of square footage developed, or
Right.
city contractors. So you have
This
a
isn't
lot of
changing.
limitations already.
This isn't changing any of that.
That doesn't change any of that, but that's just
Right.
something to note if you're asking about what the limits are.
Well, that was that Proposition AA, wasn't it, that we did there a while back?
Yes,
Wasn't that what it was? Yes.
it's either VP or AA. Sorry.
I think it was AA. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll defer to the rest of you, but I don't really know what dollar amount to put in there. I mean, I have no idea at this point. I mean, if it's 1,000 or 500 or 5,000, I mean, I don't know. I'll defer to the rest of my colleagues for something like that. I have no opinion one way or another at this point. That's all for me, Vince.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, and
Yeah.
I do prefer Exhibit B over A. I think B gives it a little bit more control, so to speak, of the future. So.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Min, any questions and comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I too agree with Councilmember Chavez. I would prefer attachment B because it is specific, it's clearer on certain items, and I think it gives us more control. As for the amount, I also don't have a number in my head. I think at the last meeting, I mentioned I was fine with defaulting to the states if it requires us to actually put it on paper. So I don't really have an opinion on that. In terms of the going back to the previous question I asked, I know, Madam City Clerk, you mentioned, excuse me, the FPPC adjusted based on CPI. Does that mean in our ordinance we have to specify that ourselves if we wanted to do it that way? Or does FPPC automatically does it across the board?
Since it's our ordinance, And it would be up to council whether you want to do an automatic, annual percent increase, or if you want to allow a dollar increase every year.
Okay, thank you. Then I would say if we were to create an amount, then I think we should at least, in our due diligence, allow for some flexibility that it be adjusted per CPI or per council discussion. Kind of like how we always discuss certain rate increases at the beginning of a fiscal year. And there has to be some kind of council deliberation or action to make that happen. As for the, I'm going through the highlighted sections. As for the limitations on, I think we should have that, and the amount should be consistent with whatever amount we designate as the campaign contribution limit. So if we, for example, default to the state's 5,000, and I think that should apply to the loan as well. And I also concur with the redesignation of the Candidate Control Campaign Committee, because I think without that, it would be a pretty big hassle for someone to have to, if I understand correctly, that's the one where if we didn't have a provision, they'd have to recreate a new committee every single election cycle. Is that correct? Okay, so I would like to save people the hassle of that paperwork because it just seems highly unnecessary. And I think that's all the highlighted portions of attachment B.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Mann. Councilmember Viscar, any further questions or comments?
No, I don't. Yeah, I guess the only thing I'm kind of not understanding well is the contribution limits. We have something in place now that limits what a contractor can, or whatever can contribute, right?
That's correct, sir.
So can we create something where we have a limit, but it doesn't affect that ordinance about the contractors?
I believe so. Let me defer to the city attorney.
Yes, absolutely.
And is that something we want? I don't know.
Well, so it will not affect the charter provisions that prohibit candidates from accepting contributions from city contractors or large developers. This won't touch that. In terms of, do you want contribution limits? Well, as the clerk said, you currently are operating under the state's contribution limit anyway. You can adopt the state's contribution limit today or in the next month and tie it to CPI, as Councilman Mann said. And if you do that, you'll just simply roll along with what the state is doing. Or you could set some different limit if you felt it was better to set some different limit. But no matter what, city contractors, large developers won't be able to donate anything.
Okay, got it. And I agree with Councilmember Mann about the CPI. There's a little control there. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Viscar. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, any further questions or comments?
I just have one question regarding, like when Home Depot came in and then there was a proposed project on our border for the weed. What was it? It was going to be a grow place there.
Cannabis.
Yeah, there's the word, cannabis. So I wasn't up for election at that time, but I had a few of the people that were involved in that program or in that process call me. Some were, oh, can we just talk? Can we have coffee? And, I was not comfortable with that. I didn't meet with any of them, but I'm wondering if any developer on our border cities, they could make a contribution, correct, under our current ordinance?
Say that again.
So say, for example, there's going to be a development on our border, maybe where,
But
like
not in our
near-
city?
but not in our city, like north of Sam's Club or that area. So it's on our borders. A developer could potentially make a large contribution to a council member as our ordinance currently stands, correct?
That would be something we'd have to take a look at with Measure AA. Don't have it in front of me right now, but that would be something we'd have to get back to you on. Maybe we can take a quick look, but
Okay,
um,
because,
That issue is not before us right now, Liz. I mean,
well, what I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm wondering if we don't have that wording in our measure, could we put that as not as part of this?
I'd have to defer to the city attorney on that one.
I think we'd have to go in and change that measure, not this one, to address that issue.
Yeah, this is really about, this measure really focuses on sort of a generally applicable limit. The purpose when you adopted Measure AA, the purpose of prohibiting candidates from taking money from developers in the city was a concern about the quid pro quo that comes when a developer donates or a potential city contractor donates to a council member, and then the council member has to vote on the contract or vote on the development. At the time that was sent to the residents for their approval, the issue of how to deal with large contributors outside the city hadn't really come before us at all. So that was not made part of that measure. It's something that we could probably work on, but it would be a bit more complex to draft than what's in front of us today. And I would rather not try and tie the two together because as we've said, as Peggy said, this would be good to get this one on the books and then perhaps come back to that issue if the council's concerned about it. We're more than happy to look into that and see what we can bring you.
Hey, Greg, just a real quick question, Cindy, I'm sorry. Since that was adopted by the voters, wouldn't that have to go back before the voters for any change?
That's part of what I would want to look at, whether we were changing that
Yeah.
or whether we were perhaps looking at should we limit or prohibit the acceptance of contributions from anyone who isn't either a resident or a business or property owner within the city. I'd have to see how to do it in a way that wouldn't require us to go back to the voters, which again, would slow this process in front of us down.
Okay, I think because in my mind, I was just thinking, there's probably a lot of opportunities from the cities that surround us, San Gabriel, El Monte, some parts of Arcadia that could possibly have a large development going in, which could affect, Temple City. I know the Home Depot thing did at one time. We get sales tax from them. Excuse me, when the new logistics company came in that's now there on Lower Azusa, I mean, I was the mayor at the time, and I recall them asking if they could meet with me. One of them said, listen, if you're up for a re-election, we're happy to contribute. We're just wondering how your city feels about this, what can we do for outreach to the neighbors? So when I was just thinking about contributions in general, I was wondering if there was a way to tie it in, because we went to Measure AA to make sure that, we were going to be ethical and we weren't going to take any contributions. But since it's not part of it, but of what we're looking at tonight, but I think in my mind, it helps me set a dollar amount as to how much any council member could accept because if you can accept only up to $1,000, I don't have a huge concern about that. But if I can accept $25,000 or $20,000 from a developer putting something on that's going to be in the boundaries of our city that might affect our city, I'm more concerned about that type. So I don't know where to go as far as with setting a number, as this is, we should only be able to raise $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000. I mean, of the two before us, I understand B more than I do. I think it's more simple to understand. So I would be in favor of B, but maybe somewhere down the line, we look at, I don't know if it's actually having to go back to the voters, but maybe just how we would go about doing that, Greg, in the future, just to kind of protect anybody who is coming onto council down the road. I mean, just to ensure the integrity of Measure AA really stays and no boundaries within our city can influence that, if you will. That's all. I guess that's enough.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for your comments. And as far as I'm concerned, I am with the rest of the city council, especially Councilmember Mann. I feel that the state law really is not meant for a city like our size, but one size does not fit all. But because it's out there, I think our ordinance would. I think it's okay to adopt the state's limit, because regardless, it's going to apply to us if we don't adopt something. I have a bigger concern about redestination. Actually, that's why I brought this to the city council. I think it's a waste of taxpayer time and money if they support one of us to run for campaign and we have to return unused funds, sunset the amount. And I remember my bad experience in trying to open up a bank account, because nobody wants to do business with us because our contribution is so little. But yet the state says you must have a bank account, and you cannot even keep a private account, even if you keep good books. They won't allow you. You have to have a bank account, but banks don't like to do business with us because, good thing about our cities is that none of our campaign really costs a lot of money. But so I think having this ordinance here will just keep the state out of our hair. I appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem's comment about developer outside our city might try to support a candidate, but I do have to remind everybody that the PPC does require every candidate to file a campaign statement, so folks can still find out who's been supporting the candidates outside. So with that, I think we have enough provisions here. I will be okay with what was proposed. That is, state with a state limit, with the CPI, with the limitation of loans to the maximum of the maximum dollar as stated in the state law. I perhaps.
I'm sorry, what was the state limit on the loans? I don't recall that number.
There is none. You would have to designate that component. And we did hear from Councilmember Mann that he would want it. His suggestion was have it consistent with the campaign contribution level.
So $4,900.
Yeah, or whatever the state law is. Yes.
Right. That I heard that the state law was $4,900.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I don't know where they came up with 4,900. Maybe we should make it 4,899. But 40. I mean, I'm a round off kind of guy. Why they said 4,900 instead of 5,000, I have no idea. But I'm sure there was some reason for it. But I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is. And then, of course, subject to, as William said, looking at this every couple of years or to determine whether we're going to increase that. by whatever percentage we decided would be fair, I suppose.
I do want to follow up on one thing Councilmember Chavez said earlier, which is, does the so-called loan apply to the candidate, him or herself? In reading it, it's not immediately apparent that the candidate loaned to him or herself as a part, because to me, as a part, I mean, I loan myself money when I was doing my campaigning, and I think a lot of us do. And then I just want to make sure the candidate, him or herself, or a family member, close family member, you know, like wife, the husband, husband to wife, that sort of somebody really close, or parents to kids, are either exempt or spelled out what that limitation is.
Sure, we'll add that. We'll add that to clarify that section. I think that makes sense.
To address that issue, if you look at the section on campaign contributions under paragraph C, it says this limitation, this shall not apply to contributions of a candidate's personal funds. Could we frame something like that into the limitation on loans as well?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I think that, you know, the language is already there, so you may want to consider using that. That's a good point, Vince.
Right. That's all I have. And
Mayor, can I ask one more question?
yeah, please.
Is it correct to presume that once we adopt such an ordinance, that this can be revisited for whatever reason?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
You know, one last thing. I don't know about you guys, but I kept on the campaign contribution limit and restrictions section. I kept reading paragraph A and B like over and over, trying to figure out what's the difference between those two paragraphs. And I finally figured out that one applies to actual contributions to the candidate, and the other one applies to contributions made to someone who supports or opposes that candidate. Is that correct? I mean, is that that's the difference, isn't it?
Yep.
Greg?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm looking at that guy. I mean, they look exactly alike. I mean, it's like, but then I caught on, okay, there it is, okay, because I'm saying, why are we saying this twice? But okay, I just wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly, so thanks. All right, thanks, Vince, that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. So do we need a formal motion to move, or is this enough of a council discussion to allow Madam Clerk to come back?
Mayor, I think we have very clear direction. Just to kind of reiterate, it's pretty much option B with, and I haven't heard anything else. We'll come back with the state law, the current state limits as the contribution level, and the direction is pretty clear.
But it'll be a city ordinance.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Cook and Madam Clerk and the City Attorney. And we'll move on to the next item then. We have one new business tonight. That is a report from the Community Development Department annual report for 2021 calendar year. Mr. Cook.
Mayor Yu, members of the council, thank you so much for taking the time today to jump on the Mayor Yu's State of the City, the little engine that could. I remember in February of 2020, Mr. Reimers, who was our interim director at the time, coming to me and saying, I'm worried how we're going to provide service, but I got a plan. I got a good plan and we're ready to go. Give me a few weeks and we'll be able to roll most of this out so that there will be a continuity of service. And not only has community development delivered on that, and Mayor, you pointed this out economically, we did not really miss a beat in terms of how we serviced the development community during the pandemic, to the point where it was quite impressive within a few days of 2022 and throughout 2020 through 2021, the way in which our development community, homeowners and builders have been able to interact with our staff and get approvals done has been nothing short of extraordinary. I would measure up our organization in our community development department to many other larger ones in how we've been able to deliver services over the last 18 months. And thank you to Mr. Reimers under his leadership as Community Development Director, and to all the staff who've made, and our partners, TransTech, County of Los Angeles, and others who've helped us do that. So tonight, very briefly, Mr. Reimers will go over this. I thought it was important for him to highlight today, and thank you for indulging us on this, bring forward the annual report and kind of show you some of the numbers, not only the narrative, but also the numbers that belie this report that really show how we've recovered and how some of the points that Mary Yu made earlier this evening. So with that, Mary Yu, if I may, I'll turn it over to Director Reimers.
Thank you, Director Reimers. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Yeah, we wanted to present to you our annual report. We've been preparing this since I joined the city back in 2015. And so I'm glad that we have the opportunity tonight to talk to you about the Community Development Department, what's happening and what's new. Here we go. So in terms of trends, what we've been finding is that since about 2016, 2015, 2017, there was a kind of a peak in terms of activity. And then from that, there was a start to come into a sort of a valley. That valley leveled off in 2020. And since 2020, we've seen an increase in a number of important indicators, including permits issued, the value of those permits that are being issued, housing construction, some of the larger planning cases, and revenue. So I just first wanted to go over the building permit activity. In terms of building permit activity, we've seen a 43% increase in building permit valuation between last year and the year before that, so between 2020 and 2021. We also saw a 33% increase in the number of new permits. So not just the value of the work being done, but also just the totality of new permits being pulled has increased. We have seen something peculiar, which is fewer permits are being finalized. That could be because projects were put on hold due to the cost of supplies or the cost or perhaps inflation. But we're keeping an eye on that and following up with property owners and developers to make sure that their permits don't expire. So here graphically is what we've seen. So since 2015, 2016, 2017, we've seen kind of that was the peak of development in the city. And then since then, there was kind of a falling in terms of the amount of fees being paid and the total value of work being done. That hit bottom at 2020, and since then we've been recovering, and in some cases we're higher than where we were before the pandemic started. So 2015, 2016, 2017 is when Camellia Square was permitted. You saw Linden Walk come through, Blossom Walk, which was Olson Company's project on McCulloch. So some very large projects really increased the numbers there. And so this now is in the gray line, you have the permits issued, and in the red line, you have permits finalized. So again, you can see kind of the peak hitting in 2015, a slower kind of decline to 2020, and the increase in the number of permits being issued almost to pre-pandemic levels in 2021. In terms of housing construction activity, what we found here is that we did issue our first mixed-use project in the Crossroads Pacific Plan area. So that started to move forward in 2021. We saw something strange also, that we didn't have any permits for new multifamily projects issued in 2021. One of the reasons for that might be the increase in the cost of materials. The state also allowed all of those entitlements to be put on hold for a period of 2 years. So it could be a lot of developers put those projects on hold, waiting for the supply cost to come down since their entitlements are frozen. We did see a continued strong growth in ADUs. So here's that information graphically. So in the kind of magenta, brighter red color on the bottom there is single family growth. In the gray is multifamily growth, and accessory dwelling units are shown in pink. And so you can see since 2018, a large amount of growth has kind of moved from the multifamily sector to the accessory dwelling unit sector, with single family growth also picking up in 20 and 21. This is the same information, just in a line graph, so I'll breeze past that. We also look every year at the top permits that were issued that year in terms of valuation. And so the top one in 2021 was the 73-unit mixed-use project at 5570 Rosemead Boulevard. After that, and this is peculiar to 2021, everything else after that was new single-family dwellings. Sometimes you might see a large tenant improvement in the list. Sometimes, often you would find multifamily developments in the list. But this year, there were none of the multifamily projects. In terms of customer service, I just wanted to highlight that we are continuing to provide services virtually and in person. Our counter is open Monday through Thursday. We do provide service virtually as well. People can meet with us virtually. They can call us. They can set up an appointment to have us call them. We also respond quite a bit by email as well. One benefit that has come through this most recent process is that we've seen customers can now submit their projects online, where they used to have to come in at a certain time of day or a certain day of the week in order to meet with staff and turn in their projects. Now customers can apply for projects online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Last year we started offering in-person options available due to COVID, so that has reopened. And we wanted to give you an idea of the number of projects that are submitting virtually. So for instance, our building plan check submittals, we've received 100% of those digitally. That's 411 applications we've received. We've also been taking payments for permits online. We accepted 930 just in 2021. Planning applications can also be submitted virtually. We received 430 of those. Total planning applications, and 317 of those were done virtually. So you can see that it's a very popular way of people submitting plans. They don't have to stand in line. They don't have to drive to City Hall. They don't have to wait in line. So that it's been really popular for people to submit online. In terms of appointments, we wanted to give you a sense for where most people are coming when they come to City Hall. We had last year 700 appointments out of the almost 2,000 appointments with our building staff. After that was our parking tickets and parking permit counter. Most of that was the permit activity, mostly because we ended up doing 2 years of permits in 1 year. So 2 years of overnight parking permits in 1 year. So that was a lot of activity. That was unusual. And then planning appointments, there's around 400. Receptionist calls, we've been tracking that every day. And so we have almost 10,000 receptionist calls in a year. So 9,249. In terms of business licensing, we issued...
I'm sorry, can I interrupt real quick? I just had a quick question. If you go back to the last slide, I'm sorry, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Community preservation, is that, what is, when you have 8, what does that total represent? What is that?
That was 8 people who came in to talk to a code enforcement officer.
Okay. And how are we handling code enforcement right now? Are we doing it more on a reactive basis or a proactive basis?
No, it's proactive, sir.
Do we have people on the streets who are driving around looking for unkept yards and things like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I've noticed in driving to work at least 4 or 5 yards that, in my view, would be unkept, but we don't know whether or not that's on the city's radar. It may already be, I suppose, correct? I mean, we're not really given an updated list of cases in progress, I don't think, are we?
Once a month, we send you a list of all the...
I know you send out a report once a month, yeah. And those are on there then.
Yes,
Those are
sir.
the ones that are actively being investigated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And
Okay.
if you see sites, don't bother. I mean,
Oh, no, I haven't.
don't mind sending it to us.
I appreciate you guys going out there right away and dealing with it. And as I said, it's just, I don't know, I know that because of the COVID and everything, maybe our ability to get out there and make those contacts have been a little bit limited. But no,
Yeah, I'll
good-
talk about some of the challenges with code enforcement a little bit
Okay.
further on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. So business licenses, we had 830 renewals. Many of those were done online as well. In terms of what the Planning Commission has been up to, you'll see in 2016 we had a lot of cases. That's when Camellia Square came online, and so we were doing a lot of conditional use permits for the new tenants there. That's why that number is so high. 2021 we didn't have as many cases, and 2020, 2021 was after we implemented the new zoning code, and one of the benefits of that was that we streamlined a few processes, moving things from things that had to go to Planning Commission, turning those into standards so that they could be approved at a staff level. So this is a pie chart showing the different types of cases that the planners receive in a year. For the most part, those zoning clearances are the things that are approved over the counter or require very little review and can be done at a staff level. So 3/4 of the projects that we receive are done at a staff level rather quickly. And then you see the conditional use permits really only make up about 3% of the work that the staff does. In terms of significant projects in 2021, we received plans for a new mixed-use development at 9465 Las Tunas for 46 residential housing units. We also received plans for subdividing Casa Robles, the former Pasadena Nazarene, the Nazarene retirement community between Oak and Encinita. We reviewed the plans for 5430 Rosemead Boulevard, a 26-unit apartment building. We received plans for the site improvements to Kmart, the Kmart shopping center there. And in terms of long-range planning, we had a number of projects going on. We were working on the update to the housing element. In 2021, we also were working on objective design standards for the R2 and the R3 zones. Zoning code amendments related to SB 9, an annual cleanup ordinance for the zoning code, and then some amendments to the Crossroads specific plan. In terms of community preservation, 2020 and 2021 saw very similar years. One of the things that was difficult for us in 2020 and 2021 was some staff turnover. We went for about a 1-year period where we had only one code enforcement officer. We are happy that we now have Eric So, our new community preservation officer, online. He came online late last year, and so now we've started to see the numbers ticking up in terms of the number of cases opened. These are the types of cases that the community preservation staff open. Most of it is property maintenance issues, about 50% of it. And then you'll also see some right-of-way violations, that stuff that's left in the public right-of-way, some noise and building code issues. And then in terms of parking permits and public works activities, there's about 1,000 parking permit applications were approved last year. The number of work orders performed by the maintenance staff went up by 20%, which is huge in 2021. And then we had 1.1 miles of streets repaved in 2021. Here's a chart showing kind of activity about the parking program, also the public works activities. You can see also encroachment permit activity went up from about 200 encroachment permits to 300, so quite a significant increase there. And then lastly, total revenue. Similar to the other graphs that you saw, this is all the revenue that community development takes in. including parking permits, building permits, planning applications, and so forth. So similar to the other graph, you see 2015, 16, and 17 were kind of our peak years. And then 2021, we're seeing back an increase kind of close to pre-pandemic levels. So that concludes my presentation. I did want to just take a moment, if I can, to thank the Community Development Department staff for all their work in 2021. It was a year of change, and a lot of, through it all, was getting a lot of good input from them on how we could improve our services to the public. So thank you to them for their initiative in trying to improve those services.
Thank you, Director Remus. Appreciate the report. At this time, I would like to go back to the council and see if they have any questions, starting with Councilmember Chavez.
Mayor, Scott, who's overseeing the new trash bins as far as people taking them in or putting them out there correctly? Does that fall within your department, or is that up to Athens? Who's overseeing that?
That is community preservation staff follows up on that.
Okay, we're not citing anybody yet, are we? Or are we?
No, we don't typically cite for that. What we do is we leave them a note letting them know that they need to take the trash in by a certain time. And usually if we just canvass an area, that usually resolves the issue.
Okay. Because I guess I'll bring this up with Brian later. There's a problem that I have brought up to Brian concerning a street in the city that has apparently been told it's okay to leave the trash cans out, and we were getting complaints from neighbors, and apparently Athens went and told them it was, and they brought them in for a while, but I got word that they're out again and they're staying out all week. So I know Brian knows the issue, but I forgot to mention it to him during the week. But I didn't know whether the city was dealing with that or if Athens was dealing with that. But it sounds like that's up to us. So
yes,
that'll be easier to resolve. So that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Min, any question for staff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Scott, you had a chart or a table that showed, you don't need to bring it up. You had a table that showed the amount of fees we collect for different projects, the top 10 permits. And you also mentioned we had a pretty significant number of ADU permits that we granted. Can you give us a rough idea what's the fee like for a typical ADU that does not include the rebuilding of the single family dwelling?
So if it's entirely new construction and it's detached, the value of that work tends to be around $100,000. In terms of the fees paid, I don't know offhand. I'd have to. I can send you an email tomorrow and let you know what the typical amount of fees are for those.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And my second question is, you also went over the business license renewals. I thought it was interesting to see the number of new business renewals. Do we happen to also keep track of what's the term? I guess non-renewals, which indicate a business going out of business presumably or no longer operating. Do we keep track of that number?
That one's always hard for us, and that's actually what we're doing right now. Our business license technician, Sandra Scott, is working on that. So the assumption is that if people didn't renew, that possibly they're just trying to avoid the business license fee, or they forgot to do it. So we reach out to them, we remind them, are you still in business? So that's, and then if we don't hear back from them, then the community preservation staff and the business license tech work together to go out to the sites to see if the businesses actually have closed. So the next few months is quite a busy time for them to kind of pare that list down and see. A lot of businesses, when they close, they don't notify us.
Great, thank you. And just out of professional curiosity, I noticed zoning clearances account for 75% of planning cases received. And can you give a brief summary of what that work actually entails?
Sure. Yeah, the zoning clearances are anything from as small to like someone building a shed or putting in a fence where we want to make sure that it just complies with the zoning code, to a house addition, or a remodel to the interior of a house.
Okay, so it's pretty, it covers a pretty broad spectrum of work.
Yeah, it's basically anything where we need to make sure that compliance with the zoning code is being done, but we don't need to go through a design review process.
Oh, understood. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Viscar, any questions? You're on mute. You're still on mute, Councilmember Viscar.
Okay, sorry. Scott, you had one stat that said work orders. What was that? What is that?
So yeah, work orders are the work that the public works maintenance staff responds to. So that could be anything from potholes to work that needs to be done inside of City Hall, trash that needs to be cleaned up at the city parking lots, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Strinquist, any questions for staff? You're on mute again.
No questions.
I too don't have any question. I have a question on work order, but that was already asked. So, thank you so much. So at this time, I'd like to open up for public comments. I'll ask any member of the public watching at home to call in at the Zoom number. Once you are on, the city clerk will make sure you're able to speak. So we'll wait a little bit. So, Madam Clerk, are there any public callers offering comments?
Mayor Yu, there are no public callers and there are no email requests to speak.
Okay. With nothing from the public and a reasonable time have been given for them to call in, I will close public comments and bring it back to the City Council for discussion. Going back to the council for any final questions or comments, starting with Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor Yu. I just want to thank Director Ramers and his staff and everyone in the Community Development Department for all the work they've done this past year. As Mayor Yu pointed out in his State of the City address, our departments, if anything, this past year have learned to adapt to our new environment, and certainly our development department has gone and taken that to the next level. And so congratulations on a job well done. And I'm sure there's still challenges ahead, but it sounds like we're ready to meet those. And we've got a good group of people over there. So make sure you thank the rest of them for us. Since none of us get in there very much anymore, I would say it myself. I even forget to bring the donuts in on council day, so I think Brian doesn't like me to go in there too much. So try to stay away as much as we can. But thank everybody for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Mann, do you have any final questions or comments?
I might be the only one who enjoys reading this kind of report. So I actually found it really interesting to go through all the different categories and numbers and factoids here and there. I thought the one part that jumped out at me was that discrepancy in permit issued and permits final. I thought that was really interesting because it seems like historically, well, I guess it has happened in the past, but to see it kind of reach that point now with all the uncertainties in COVID, I thought that was an interesting observation that you also made about construction costs kind of going haywire within the last year and potentially affecting how people want to start construction now. They want to delay it. I mean, there's a house on my block that is going through that exact same thing. They bought the place over a year and a half ago, and they haven't touched it at all. And the one thing that's happened is the price of wood went up 3 times its previous cost at one point, so on and so forth. But I do want to also extend my appreciation to all of our planning, everyone in our community development and planning department. Our focus on customer service, I think, really should remain our #1 priority across all departments, I should say. But particularly since we're talking about this, I appreciate the ingenuity behind adapting and finding ways to get help to those that need it, even during COVID, and also appreciate the efforts to help those who can't meet virtually or prefer not to. I think that's equally important, is that we're not forcing people into one particular system that might not be conducive to them. I see that experience a lot in my county line of work, where you have some customers that operate much better if they speak with you, either on the phone or over the counter. So thank you all for doing that. And yeah, looking forward to the some of the projects that you mentioned. I guess one last question: the project you mentioned on Las Tunas, that's the one across from Ralph's, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Min. Councilmember Scar, any final comments? Oh, I could see you on mute, Councilmember Scar.
I swear this thing's doing it by itself. I'm not touching it. Okay. No further comments.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, any additional questions or comments?
A couple of questions. Scott, I mentioned this to Brian today when we met. I was on Rosemead Boulevard, and the new development that's going in there, it said coming soon luxury apartments. And I had mentioned to Brian, I thought those were condos. Is it just, has something changed? And Brian was going to check into it. But now that I have you with us this evening, I thought you could, kind of clarify that.
Well, there are 2 different projects on Rosemead. So the one
okay.
across from the former Denny's location, that
Yes.
one, they do have a condo map approved. So our expectation that it was going to be a condominium development. But one strategy that some condo developers use is that they have the property subdivided for condominiums. They end up renting them for the first few years until their liability decreases. And then they sell them units afterward.
Okay, so that's the one I seen, the one that was directly across the street, and it just caught my eye. And I was like, apartments? I thought these were condos. So yeah, I didn't know that that's how they work that.
Yeah.
But Brian mentioned either way, they're not going to be inexpensive rentals for an apartment.
No.
But what is going to be the luxury? Is it the inside? Is it the outside amenities? Is there a pool there?
Well, the whole development is built around a common courtyard that's for each, that's for the activities. And then as part of the Crossroads specific plan, we did require them to provide a certain amount of community area, interior community room as well. And one reason why we do that is because we think it provides for, so as a, I don't know how to say it, some level that helps increase the benefit of the project. So an incentive, an accoutrement, something.
Okay.
How many units are there?
That one is 76 units.
76.
Yeah.
And then my next question was, I think I just forgot what my next question was. It was more of a statement. they're really, it was really exciting today. Brian and I just drove around. We went to Live Oak Park and went to see the new park, and it was absolutely beautiful. The only thing I would remove would have been the bathrooms, but that's just my personal viewpoint. But once I looked at them from a different view,
try going there with young kids and no bathroom.
I think there were many places I went to with the young kids, but I'm not talking so much about having the bathroom or not. It was just when I was looking at that, it seemed like it was dead in the center, but it's actually more, when you look at it from a different viewpoint, if you look at it from the north side, then you actually see that it's not in the dead center of the park. It just looks that way.
It's further east.
Yeah, it just looks that way because it's all open right now into the parking lot. But it's just beautiful. But what was I saying before that?
Are we getting private tours of the park? I didn't get offered one. Is that?
Yes,
I didn't get
got
offered
a private tour today.
Oh, nice.
I asked for one, Tom.
I guess you have to ask. Nobody offers.
Oh, goodness. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say about the park? Anyway, I can't recall what it was right now, but oh, I know when we were going around north in this area, I was pleasantly surprised to see so many vacant lots where a new development is going in. It just made me feel like there's a resurgence of all the building again. And there was one property in particular, it's off of, I believe it's Garibaldi, not Woodruff, but Garibaldi. And it used to be, it was vacant for the longest time, Scott, and they put an ADU on it. It's a corner lot. Do you know which one I'm speaking to? It's just...
What's the cross street?
It's just, well, it's, I'm trying to think what that street would have been. It's probably after Primrose. What's the street after Primrose?
There's Cloverly.
So maybe it's Cloverly. It's a corner lot. And it was dilapidated, the front house, and they converted the garage into an ADU. And it had been just a mess for 3 or 4 years. I could not believe today when I looked at it, how beautiful it is. The ADU is gorgeous. The house, they put new windows in. So I think that's an example of an ADU that was done really well. So I just wanted to share that when we did drive around, I must have noticed at least 6 houses within 5 blocks that have been torn down and there's going to be new housing on them. So just congratulations to the staff for that. When you mentioned that something that positive that has come from the pandemic is the fact that processes have become so much more accessible to streamline things through City Hall. And I think that's probably something, even when we come out of this pandemic, that's going to be a real asset to staff. And I was wondering, is that because we had the foresight in the planning department when Michael was there to implement that new software program?
Yeah, I think we were really benefited. Michael was very tech savvy, and when he was around, we already had started moving towards reviewing plans online. And in fact, before the pandemic hit, planning was requiring plans to be submitted digitally, so they could review it digitally. They could check it more accurately online. And then we have the QuickBase system, which now we can use. We track not just building and planning activity, code enforcement activity, parking permits, yard sale permits. We use it for work orders. We're using it for a lot of different tools. It's been really, really helpful.
And do we own that software, or do we pay a monthly fee for it?
It's an annual fee. Yeah. It's a cloud-based system, so it's all stored on the cloud.
Well, it seems like that was really a great investment.
Yes, it has been. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for the work that you do. It's been great to see things picking up again and things really continue to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I too echo my fellow council members' sentiment, and thank you, Director Remus. Thank you to your staff. Thank you. We appreciate the report. It's refreshing, even though we hear from you every month. But it's also great to hear you summarize it that way. In particular, echoing what Mayor Pro Tem has said, the fact that we're actually took advantage of technology and be able to service the community 24/7, but yet at the same time, you're still open to business if they should want to come in just by appointment only. So thank you for doing that. And I was also particularly impressed that I look at the number of planning projects in your report, they largely remain the same, but the number of meetings that the Plan Commission have to conduct to provide discretionary review has gone down. So I appreciate that you have streamlined the process. And even though you didn't report, I would presume that would maybe in some indirect way lower the cost of development by having them submit a little less, prepare a little less work. And having been on their side of the fence, submitting plans to planning departments, I can certainly appreciate you and your staff doing that. So thank you for that. Yeah, with that, do we need a motion to receive and file? No, I
No,
see
sir.
that City Attorney shaking his head. No, thank you, Mr. Cook. So,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to receive and file.
all right, well, motion is made. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, let's vote on it anyways. Any objections? Seeing none, so is the reports received and filed, and thank you, Director Remus again.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, next item is update from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Yu, and members of the council. I'll be brief. Thank you, Mayor Yu. Thank you to Red 88 as well, Mark, Travis. I know Amir's with us today. Ileana and Tinny for doing all the production and all the work behind the scenes, and for the state of the city this evening. We'll be coming to you as some of the points that Mayor Yu made at the State of the City today. We'll be coming back to the council related to discussions from a more strategic planning work plan standpoint related to the AARP or the American Rescue Act funds of about $8 million. The audit committee did meet, so our fund balance, and you saw through Mayor Yu's State of the City that our fund balance went up as well. So you do have some funding in which to expend to reinvest back into the community, which is an extraordinary thing. I didn't think we'd be here, quite frankly, if you asked me in mid part of 2020, that we'd be in the financial position we are to really reinvest back in the community, which is, it's a great thing. And you guys will have that discussion, and we'll see where your priorities lie and where you want that money to be reinvested back in. That's it for me, Mary, for this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. And next item is update from Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Murphy. Any updates for us?
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, I sort of half jokingly said earlier that the FPPC could change its mind. We're beginning to get some word that Housing and Community Development is changing the way that it interprets some statutes and some requirements that have long been sort of held to mean one thing, and now they might be meaning another. I don't want to frighten Mr. Reimers too much, so I'll just say that their interpretation of some housing element related requirements might turn out to require a bit more work by us this year once our housing element gets certified. But as yet, it's all unofficial. They haven't put anything on paper. They're just advising cities sort of one at a time that they're ramping up some requirements. So that is something that the state does from time to time, and we will, of course, help Mr. Reimers and his department deal with it as it comes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Next item is council reports regarding ad hoc or standing committee meetings. Any reports from the council?
Mayor, I do have a report on the audit standing committee if you'd like.
Yeah, please, Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you. So Mayor, you and I met City Manager Cook and Administrative Services Director Paragas and our auditors, Roger Alfaro from Eide Bailey. It was our exit conference, basically to cover the end of their work. And just to share with the council, I think we're going to be, Brian, are we getting that report next meeting, I believe, or?
It's either next meeting or the following meeting after that, sir.
Okay, thank you. So just to kind of heads up, we did receive an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level that you can receive for your financial statement. So, of course, great job to everyone involved. There were a couple of weaknesses, of course, that were identified. I wasn't really quite sure what he was talking about until I asked him to explain it in layman's terms, but they basically had to deal with mislabeling or misidentifying certain things in the report regarding capital assets that were actually capitalized rather than expense. But at any rate, the bottom line is the adjustments were resolved and there is no problem. There were a couple of uncorrected, what they call uncorrected misstatements, but again, those are found to be immaterial as far as the financial statements we're dealing with. On a good note, our auditors reported that there were no difficulties in dealing with staff, so that's pretty much par for the course. We have a great staff that does a lot of work, and we've worked with our auditors for a couple of years now, at least I know. There was some additional work needed this year that we hadn't in prior years, and that had to do with it was a compliance accounting because of the receipt of federal funds. As was mentioned earlier, some of the funds that we received from the federal government due to COVID and stuff required some additional work, but that was taken care of as well. I think that's about it to report. As I said, we'll be getting the full report to council probably either next meeting or the meeting after. So Mayor, unless you have anything else to add to that, that's all
No, great report, and perhaps just maybe just a little bit of illustration. I mean, the couple of shortcomings that was pointed out in the audit report, I mean, they were in the bigger scheme of things, like really minuscule amount and compared to the overall picture. So they were, while they were pointed out as improvements needed, they are really quite minor in the overall scheme of things. It's like 0.4% or whatever number that was misquote wasn't as accurate as it could be, or something to that effect. So that's all I have to add. Any other reports? If not, I will move on to the next item, which is council items separate from the city manager's regular agenda. Again, start with Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor Yu. I don't really have anything other than, as I've said it earlier, thank Mayor Yu for his State of the City address and for Red 88. And, you know, they always do such a professional job. And of course, Vince did a great job in presenting it, as well as the other presenters as well. You know, it kind of looks great at the end, but, you know, I know Vince can attest, it's a lot of hard work. It's not easy as it looks. But you know, I think, you know, the fact that Vince did a great job and it was a great production, and thanks, of course, to Ileana and to Tinny, everybody who contributed, makes the city look good. And pointed out that only one thing is I'd like to know is, did we get permission from Waddy Piper to use the title? Does anybody know who Waddy Piper is? Waddy Piper wrote The Little Engine That Could. And we all, as parents, we all know that book, right, Cindy? You remember that book, The Little Engine That Could?
Yeah,
That's
but
Waddy
nobody
Piper.
remembers the author.
I just want to make sure we're not in trouble with him for using that that term, but it was cute. It was cute. It was a good thing. So
Maybe we should have said the little engine that did.
yeah. Well, we didn't steal the engine. We said the little city that could. So
Or the little
that's a
city
good
that
thing.
did, since we
Yeah, there you go. No,
almost finished both of these projects.
it was nice. Okay, well that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mitt.
Yeah, I too want to congratulate you, Mayor Yu, on a wonderful State of the City address. It was very seamless, everything. So again, I know Red 88, most of us have worked with Red 88 directly, absolute professionals in their craft, and it shows. It really shows in the production value of it. I also enjoyed the extra touch of bringing in the gentleman from the barber shop, Miss Jing Lee, and Commissioner Barodi. I thought that was very on point because of how relevant they themselves were with the topic being discussed, and that was also the first time I saw high quality pictures of what the parts of the library looked like inside. So that was I'm sure it's going to look way better in person. So I'm waiting for that. And, just like the park, it looks fantastic now, but I can only imagine what the finished product's going to look like when it's all said and done. And yeah, no, thank you for pointing out all the progress and highlighting those. And really, I think what I really appreciate about it was, Mayor Yu, you're very generous in shining the spotlight on others, and highlighting not just all the city staff and the departments, but everyone else who supports city operations as well. So besides that, I don't have much beyond when the Rams won the Super Bowl, there were some fireworks going off in my area, but nowhere near the amount of fireworks as when the Dodgers won. That's for sure. It was very quiet compared to that evening. But anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scar.
Yeah. Well, I already congratulated you, Vince, and I'll just tell you again, you did an excellent job. Really enjoyed that. And I want to make one other comment. I really enjoyed Scott's presentation tonight because it's more of the nitty gritty that we see and affects us on a daily basis. If we can incorporate more of that, at least monthly somehow, I'd like to see that, or have a chance to discuss some of it. Doesn't have to dominate a meeting, but I would, as I said, I would like to see more of it. Leave it at that. We can talk about it, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Scar. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, any items from you?
Let's see. We lost our director from the mosquito and vector control. He is moving to Washington. His wife, who was the Los Angeles County Vector and Mosquito Control Director, she got a great opportunity to go work in Washington, and they decided that now was the time. So we're in the process of going out for a new director of mosquito and vector control. We have Jason Farmid. He's our interim. He's been a longtime employee, started as one of the gentlemen who goes out in the field and sprays the pesticides. And so
Cindy,
yes.
Who does that kind of work? Are they scientists or?
They're seasonal workers that they train.
No, that run the thing.
That run the mosquito.
Yeah.
Most of them come up from for the 10 years that I've been on mosquito and vector control, we've had 4 different managers, CEOs, if you will, managers, directors, and they come, usually in the past, they had come up through working in the industry, starting off as seasonal workers and then learning more about the ins and outs. And what we found, though, is there were a lot of personnel issues that surfaced. So when we hired Jared Deaver, one of the things that the personnel committee decided on was we needed to have someone who not only understood the science and had some work in the field, but could really manage the employees. So when we've had Jason, we've had him now for about 5 years, we felt that we hit the jackpot because he was very scientific, knowledgeable, and yet he was a very good manager. He managed the employees really well. He cleaned up a lot of personnel issues. And so it's really a loss to the agency. The interim is very good. So we'll see how it goes for the next 6 months, and then we'll probably go out to a management firm to look to hire to help us. So, or what do you call them? Headhunter firms.
What's the salary? What's the salary? What do those guys make?
He was making, he had got a 17% increase because he had not gotten a raise in 5 years since he first came on. And I think his salary was bumped up to about 175.
Wow.
His wife in LA County was making over 240 though. That's a much bigger area. So I'm sure it's a more lucrative position for her to move up to Washington because he was very content here, but they don't have any children. And so a move is pretty easy for them at this point in their lives, but we hate to lose them. Let's see, with Foothill Transit, seems that the need for bus drivers continues. LA Metro just offered a $3,000 signing bonus to get bus drivers to come on and be able to provide enough service. We're down about 10% with our service because we don't have enough bus drivers. So the challenge is always to, once Metro does something, then Foothill Transit's going to probably look to be competitive as far as hiring goes, but we don't actually do the hiring. We have 2 contractors that we contract out with and they do the hiring. But inevitably, if they pay more, they're going to charge Foothill Transit more to, you know, provide the service. So all around, it's all about dollars and cents. I can't think of, let's see, was there anything else? Oh, I wanted to ask Adam, is Adam on the call? Adam Matsumoto, is he here?
He's here.
Quite
Yes,
a
I
few
am,
peop-
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, hi, Adam. Quite a few people have asked me if we have the pickleball courts up yet. The lines, were they drawn in the courts? It was hard to tell today. I didn't get off the car to look. We just drove by quickly.
Sure. We didn't actually permanently draw on lines for pickleball courts. What we ended up doing is we have these temporary lines that can be pulled out on request, along with pickleball equipment to be utilized. So we still maintain that dual use of the tennis courts and for pickleball.
Okay, so people can go to the park now and they request the pickleball equipment?
Well, for the equipment and also for the temporary lines, what we are doing is we're going to be setting up some specific timeframes for pickleball court use. And we're starting that out as part of our Healthy TC February activity. But we'll get more information out to the community. And if you had either residents or people that you knew directly, I wouldn't mind outreaching to them to talk about the pickleball opportunities.
Okay, I'll connect you with them. Thank you. And
Of course.
that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And then I I too want to thank everybody for kind words on the state of the city. And really, it's like Councilmember Chavez was saying, it's staff who did all the heavy lifting behind the scene. But from me personally, I really want to thank all of you, my fellow council members, city manager, city attorney, for great work in making my life easy this year. And one thing that I could have improved on it, and I just want to say that I have suggested when we came with the theme, the little city that could, was to actually have a picture of a train of the little engine that could, if I could share that looking, I don't know, I'll put my camera over here.
Wait a minute, it's
I
disappearing.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know if this stand still or something. I'll maybe put it on my face. I don't know. But anyways, initially I wanted Mr. Cook's face on that front. And unfortunately, that did not get put in. So if I were to redo that State of the City again, I'll make sure I'll do the graphics and put Mr. Cook's face on.
That probably would have got copyright problems. I don't know, Greg, what do you think? I mean, yeah, that would have been pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah. That will push the envelope. But anyway, joking aside, I think that it's I really appreciate the fact that, I mean, in preparing for the State of the City, the fact that we have been able to stay on track. And I think that's the number one thing that I think we as a city should be proud of, as a council, as the manager, as the city attorney. I mean, look at the report that Director Reimers brought us tonight. And we didn't skip a beat in spite of the pandemic. And to Mr. Cook's point, if we were asked a year ago how comfortable, or a year and a half ago, I should say, how comfortable we are with the financial situation, I think we never could have thought that we've been doing so well. And so thank you, everyone, and thank you it's a great teamwork. I'm pretty thrilled.
And Vincent, thank you. You did such a great job doing this virtually. I mean, you too, Tom. You know, who would have thought we'd have 3 virtual mayors? You know, I mean, think about that. How unusual that is. Tom, you, and then our next mayor. I mean, that's 3 mayors in a row virtual. That's just.
Well, I
You
started
know,
always our ma-
You know, the thing is, it's almost like the way things are going to be, and then probably beyond what we even think. I mean,
Don't say that.
Virtual end of it. Well, it's not going away right away. I think we'll continue doing a lot of these things virtually, if not always full time, but at least probably partly we've learned a new way of doing things. So.
Yeah.
That is so true. So hopefully our next mayor would be only part-time, very, very short, and be able to, I mean, virtual, very, very short, and then be able to, we'll be able to meet in person very soon. So with that, I'll move on to our next item, which is additional public comments on item not listed on the agenda. So we will now hear additional public comments regarding items not listed. So we'll give the public a chance to call in if they want to address the council at this time. I don't see any callers, and I think that a reasonable time has been given for the public to call in. So I'm going to close public comments for the night. So that is the end of our agenda, and have a great evening. The meeting is adjourned.
Good
Thank
night, all.
Recording stopped.
Thanks, Mayor.